Do you like books? I mean, really, really like books? Then you're in the right place. Each week, your host, Sam Hankin, interviews the best of today's top-selling authors and the up-and-coming superstars of modern literature. This is The Avid Reader. Here is your host, Sam Hankin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Avid Reader. Today, our guest is Stephen Graham Jones, author of The Only Good Indians, just published by Gallery Saga, an imprint, I believe, of Simon & Schuster. Gallery publishes a whole bunch of sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and the like, which is kind of cool because that's the genre shifting that Stephen has done in his prolific career. Stephen's a Blackfeet Native American author of experimental fiction, horror, crime, science fiction. Although, if you look at his Wikipedia entry, they say his recent work is classified as horror, but he applies more literary stylings to a variety of speculative genres, as well as I said, he's very prolific, having published 22 books, and he's still 22 damn years younger than me. So he's won the Texas Institute of Letters Award. He's a National Endowment for the Arts Fellow in Fiction, and he's won the Bram Stoker Award for long fiction. So The Only Good Indians explores the cultures of Native Americans, and in a magical, realist kind of way, it touches upon love, humor, the macabre, horror, and the trials and tribulations of a people or peoples that have been given at the very best short shrift in America. So the story is compelling, kind of nerve-wracking in a good way. I challenge you to not read it in one sitting, which kind of pisses me off since I finished it at 4 in the damn morning. You're very irritating. So for most Americans, this book charts new territory, and isn't that really what any good book should do? So welcome, Stephen, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's wonderful being here.
So as I mentioned before the interview, so you got this book called The Only Good Indians, and today and in our time, for example, the Washington Redskins are changing their name. So you have a book with the title. It's kind of, to many today, would seem pejorative for two reasons. One, the use of the word Indian, and two, for the finishing of this aphorism, which you leave unfinished. So what's the deal?
What's the deal is I wanted to come at that aphorism head on. I want to not take it back, but I want to undercut it, if that makes sense. Like the saying in the 19th century was the only good Indian is a dead Indian. So I wanted to make it plural. And then I wanted to interrogate what it means to be a good Indian in 2020, And so all these characters are wondering, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Like, if success on one side of the fence is failure on the other side, how do I navigate that? And it turns out that there's not a single way to be a good Indian. There's 7 million different ways to be a good Indian, because that's about how many of us there are, So the way to be a good Indian, it's not necessarily to adhere to traditional ways. It's not necessarily to adopt new ways or assimilate. It's just to be yourself, I think,
Yeah, which is kind of true of everybody, but you don't see it as clearly because everybody's kind of mushed up. You guys are there, and you're stuck. And you're stuck in places that other people aren't stuck in, physically. But it's interesting too, because you got 4 guys. You got Gabriel Crossguns. You got Cassidy C. Elks. You got Richard Bostrips. You got Lewis, who I don't think has an Indian name.
No.
Whole book, which is kind of interesting. We can talk about that. But so you got these 4 guys, and their lives intermesh because of something. Well, why don't you tell a summary? Because that way I don't do any spoilers.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it either. But 4 guys out in the field after elk one day make a bad decision, and 10 years later, that bad decision comes back to haunt them and to hunt them, and they have to pay for their sins. It's a slasher build like Jason and Freddy and Michael Myers and Scream and all that. There's some trespass in the past, which is punished later with interest.
Hey, so like in Native American lore, is there such a thing as Elkhead Woman? Is there such a thing like that?
Not with the Blackfeet. There's not, as far as I know. No, I made it up. I really wanted to bring Jason Voorhees up to the reservation, but the hockey mask is trademarked, so I had to come up with my own.
Okay, yeah, I get it. It kind of makes sense. Hey, what's the deal with basketball? Are you in love with basketball?
I am. I grew up. My coach would always he'd pull me aside after practice the whole time growing up, and he'd tell me, Steven, you've got to do good in your classes. You've got to have plans because you can't eat basketballs when you grow up. And I would always think to myself, I can eat basketballs when I grow up. Basketball can be my ticket. But I've had enough like knee and ankle surgeries and back injuries and shoulder injuries all over, and surgeries, that basketball is not really an option anymore unless I want to spend all my time on the operating table. So the only place I really get to play anymore is on the page, which is what I tried to do in the Only Good Indians, of course.
Yeah, and she even says I eat basketballs, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool. That's like my son. He's got to be 40, and he just keeps playing tennis nonstop. And I've never had a surgery, and I'm 68, and he's already had 3 surgeries.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm telling him, you can't tell. You can't tell anybody that.
Yeah.
It's like telling someone, just be happy or something.
Yeah, for sure. And the problem I have with basketball is, I think if I stay in my own age bracket, I can do all right. But I always get involved with the 22-year-olds at the other end of the court, and that's where the injuries come from.
I know. He always wants to play guys. He has all the stats of everybody because you can do that now online. And he always wants to play the guy who's got a scholarship to USC, UCLA or something. I said, you're an idiot, Michael. Don't do that. So, you've written all these books. So what originally kind of, this is a classic interviewer question, but what originally drove you to this almost obsession of writing about things that most of us would rather not see, or like a roller coaster or a haunted house, see out of the corner of our eyes? Something must have started you that way.
What pushed me towards horror? Stephen King says some of us are just wired that way, and I think he's right. Some people are just wired for horror. But if I have to look back to a specific incident that keyed me on horror, it's probably going to be when I was in junior high. I was living down outside Austin for a year, and the group of people I was running with, every Friday we'd rent a stack of VHS tapes of slashers of Jason and Freddy and Michael and everything, and we'd go to my friend's garage out in the country. His dad had a VCR and a TV and a couch there, and we'd pile on that couch and we'd watch them until 2 a.m. And his dad would usually sneak out sometime in the early morning, and he'd put on his Freddy glove, which he had, just a costume glove, and he would scrape it down the metal door, and that would terrify us like nothing else. And we'd blast out the side of that garage, and we'd run through the darkness for the creek, to jump in the creek because that was a safe place. I don't know why. And that feeling of running through the dark, smiling with tears going, down the side of my face because I was so scared. To me, that's one of the most pure thrills I've ever had. And so I suspect that's what I'm always trying to recreate for the reader on the page.
It's funny that you say it that way because, again, trying not to spoil the thing. Towards the end, which is a really amazing, well, there's 2 ends, actually. Yeah, there are. So towards the first end, there's laughing, but it's laughing at the totally wrong time. But I can kind of understand it. It's very strange. You have these things like laughter and fear and horror, and you can't really explain laughter. I mean, why are you? And that's how that's like.
Exactly. Yeah, I've read that physiologically, until the actual moment of eruption, a scream and a laugh present the same in a body. Like when they're scanning a body, they're just the same until they erupt. And I think horror needs to capitalize on that every chance it gets. It needs to keep the reader in kind of a state of indecision, not decision, but they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to laugh or scream. And sometimes you scream, sometimes you laugh, and both of them feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, I never really thought about that, but I think you're right. Yeah, another thing, and this makes me sound really horrible, is that they have these COVID parties now where someone with COVID goes, and then whoever catches it first gets the pool of money. Mm-hmm. And then this one guy caught it and he died. And the last thing he said was, I thought it was a hoax. And I kind of it's kind of like you almost want to laugh because you idiot, but it's a horrible thing to do. But you know why? It's because and just like in the book too, you kind of really, there's part of you that divorces yourself, uncouples yourself from it. Because if you don't, you'd have a heart attack.
Oh,
right?
for sure. Sometimes like a sick little laugh is the only response to keep you sane, you know?
Yeah, I guess doctors and nurses, like, typical gallows humor.
Hmm.
Just, yeah. There was that one, who was it? It wasn't Johnny Depp. But it was one of those Lebowski brothers movies that was actually only on YouTube, where he's being hung for the second time because the first time they shot out the rope, and he's being hung, and he turns to the other guy and he goes, "First time?"
Oh, that's like a Gary Larson comic. I like it.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the four guys, how they're different, how they're the same, as much as you want to talk about the beginning, and
Yeah.
why, as I mentioned, from time to time, Gabriel's Gabe, Cassidy's Cass, but they all have Native American names except for Lewis. So let's figure that out.
Yeah, well, Lewis is Lewis Clark, and which is a joke of a name, Lewis and Clark. And you know, I think the reason I did that, I gave him the Lewis and Clark name. Well, number one is because you don't have to have an Indian name to be Indian. I mean, I'm a Jones and I'm Blackfeet, and there's a whole lot of us who have married out and then back in and stuff, and so the names are all weird. And lots of times the names are just names that we got handed out at a table too, But the Lewis and Clark came through Blackfeet territory in 1806, I guess, and they had Lewis and Clark making their way up to the Northwest. They had pretty good luck with all the nations they encountered, except the Blackfeet. We're the only ones who gave them some grief, and we stole some guns from them, and then they shot at us, and so I'm real proud of that we pushed back a little bit, and so naming Lewis Clark was my way to kind of keep that at the front of people's minds a little bit.
So what's the deal with the other guys? The thing about Cassidy is Cassidy sees elk. Cassidy sees elk is only mentioned his name is only mentioned at the very end. But the other ones, at the beginning on, like Richard Bostrips. So I don't know. I mean, I don't mean to delve into this too deeply, but I just kind of found it fascinating. So what's that process?
The process is just I guess it's just names that I've heard growing up, I've never actually heard Seas Elk though. I made Seas Elk up myself, and it seemed fitting. The reason he ended up named Seas Elk is because when he's first introduced, there's a little game played with what his name is. I mean, it's not a game like with a reader; it's a game he's playing with himself. He wants to call himself like Cassidy thinks twice or something, and then when he sees some elk, he's Cassidy Seas Elk,
Talk about, what was really cool is the tradition, or if it is a tradition, the idea of hey, how come you say Indians and I have to say Native Americans?
Oh no, I don't think you do. I think that the kind of push back against Native Americans is kind of a holdover from the 70s, I think. I mean, we have the idea that Native American is more politically correct, and the trick is things come in and out of fashion. Like the whole time I was growing up, I grew up Indian. I knew I was Indian, and so it's weird for me to be something else. It's weird for me to say now I'm Native or I'm Indigenous or I'm Aboriginal or whatever, whatever the term that's in fashion is. And so I just stick with Indian because that's what I grew up as. But if I have to land on a single term, I'm going to land on American Indian because I love the way that that puts Indian at the center, at the noun, and makes American the modifier, the adjective. It puts it in more of an ancillary position. I think Native American makes us be the adjective. So I'm never that fond of that term. I don't push back against it. It's kind of like an empty term to me, But I just say Indian. I say Indian or Blackfeet, and sometimes I'll say Native too, I guess. But as far as I can tell, there's nothing that's actually. I mean, Indian is wrong in that we aren't from India. Columbus misnamed us, of course, and all. And people try to reclaim it by saying it means Indios, in God, which maybe there is some etymology there that I don't know about. But to me, it no longer means from India. It does make it tricky, though, when you're talking about people from the Asian continent and us. It can get tricky trying to distinguish who's who. And at that point, it's probably easiest for us to be American Indian, I think. And There's also an old term. I think it came up in the late 70s, maybe. Amerindian. Remember that? AMER Indian? Yeah, that term went away. That term was kind of efficient.
It kind of sucks. It's a suck. But I never thought about the way you say about modifier, because then you think of African American. So according to you, that's back ass words. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. It's like when Lewis is changing that light bulb, I was thinking, because it doesn't work, I'm thinking, that's a really stupid way to get up there and mess around with it. And then I realized at my bookstore, I got high ceilings, and I do exactly the same thing. And my manager's going, Sam, don't do that. You're going to fall. And I'm up there like jigging around with it and trying to pull it down and all that. And for some reason, my electrician put in like all these different kind of light bulbs, and some of them you can't figure out. And I'm up there, and I just realized, I was thinking Lewis was really stupid, but then I realized either he's not or we both are.
Yeah, well, I mean, that comes from me. When I wrote The Only Good Indians, we had just moved into a house that had this same ceiling and that same problematic light bulb. And I was up on the ladder one day, and I happened to mess with that light bulb, and I happened to look down through the blades of the fan, and I thought, what would I see? What could I have seen? And that's kind of where this novel started for me. But yeah, I'm just as stupid as Lewis, of course.
It's just basically guys. Well, and actually, in your book, the women seem to have much more athletic and prowess and maneuverability than men.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, Peta and Denora, they're both serious athletes, and Lewis has pretensions that he can play basketball, but he's really not that good. He's a lot like me. He thinks he's good, but he's not that good.
Especially when they how you push, at the beginning of a one-on-one, you just push like that.
Yeah.
And it's like he doesn't expect it coming like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really kind of a, whatever they call it, a gnomon of the entire book, that basketball. And then when we're talking about the two endings, second one, without giving anything away, the second one is like, and because it's kind of structured that way, is kind of an epigraph, epilogue.
Yeah.
Because it's structured as an epilogue, it almost stands by itself. That could have been a short story, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it was.
Yeah, no, it never was. But yeah, no, hopefully it operates like that. I tried to make each part kind of operate standalone, but when they chain together, they mean more,
Yeah, because at the beginning I thought, okay, this is a story about Lewis. And then, sometimes how you read a book and it's got like chapters that alternate between the characters, and you're kind of pissed off because you like one character so much that when they switch, you get kind of, what is he switching for? But it didn't work that way here. You kind of, they were separate, they were together, then they were separate, then they were all together again.
Yeah. Yep.
At least kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. No, I like that. Like that George Martin way of like going from character to character. That can work really well, But yeah, for this one, it seemed better to stick with Lewis for a good long while,
Yeah. What he does is, it's like, maybe you think this way too. It's like when someone says I'm suicidal, and they go, just talk to someone. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. If you talk to someone, then you wouldn't kill yourself. If you were able to talk to someone, you wouldn't. And I think that enters into the whole horror thing about what Lewis does is unimaginable, but everybody has this tipping point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think horror is kind of based on that.
I think it is too. Horror pushes you, the character, to the edge, and then pushes you just a little bit further. And the characters have to find a handhold wherever they can. And it's like, moments of extreme pressure reveal the true person, I think, and horror puts characters in that position over and over and over, where you can see who they really are finally,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, the old thing about, if a speeding train is coming and there's a little girl sitting in front of it, would you run in front of the train and push her out of the way? And you'd like to think, yes, of course I would. But then you have no idea whether you would or not.
No, yeah, you have no idea at all. It's like that same thing comes up in this first part of The Only Good Indians, when Lewis when his dog is hurt, and instead of going to his dog, he turns away, and his friend is the one who goes there. That's really, sorry, my dogs are barking. I guess they heard me talking about this.
Yeah, mine's sleeping right in front of me.
But that's really from my own life. When I was standing at the bus stop in 6th grade, maybe 5th grade, and this woman came down. We were way out in the country, and we see this car coming from way down the road. And this woman, maybe she was drunk, or I don't know what was going on. She went off the road, and she just takes out this whole line of mailboxes. They just go flying up over her car, and she overcorrects and hits the other ditch. And she finally, by the time she gets to us, she's wobbling, but she's on the blacktop. But my dog was in the road. She just ran over my dog. And so my dog is out there in the road, hurt, stuck to the asphalt. And she was my favorite dog, of course, she's my dog, And in retrospect, I should have run out to her. But what actually happened was I stepped back, and my friend ran out to get her, to pull her in from the road so she wouldn't get hit again, And that really, the Only Good Indians is, there's so many moments in here which are just stolen from my own life, It makes me think I'm not really that much of a writer. I just disguise my own life and put it on the page,
Yeah, well, yeah, the whole dog thing for dog people is especially in that one scene, it's and I'm thinking he should be a lot more upset about this than he is. It's so funny your dogs are barking. You should really upset them. When I was a kid, the same thing happened to me. There was this dog Ginger that I love so much, and I actually saw it happen too, and it was that was so traumatic for me. Yeah. But I understand why you don't go, because part of it again goes to what I said in the beginning about love. You know what? Do you remember when Eric Clapton's kid died? Yeah. And I heard him talking once about it, and he heard the ambulance and he knew what it was, but he didn't go. He said he knew what it was, and he's never forgiven himself for that.
Oh wow, that's terrible, man.
Oh.
Man.
Oh. So what's the deal with because I've never been big into this, especially when they make Lincoln a werewolf hunter or a zombie hunter. What's the whole deal with zombies? I don't even know what zombies are, really. I can't. You define a zombie for me.
A zombie is a dead person animated by something else, basically, and animated by something hungry, I guess I should say. Either hungry or wanting to reproduce, because sometimes zombies just bite you, sometimes they bite you and eat you, But yeah, so a zombie is it's basically a sleepwalker. Sleepwalkers to me are terrifying, but because that's what they are. It's like it's somebody possessed walking down the hall, and that's basically what a zombie is, with the added thing of they bite you,
Yeah, but it's kind of okay, it makes you think about what life really is. And this is very Indian too. It's what's the essence, That's how you get named too. What is the essence of this thing? Is it a person? Are they still people? No.
Yeah. No.
But they kind of are. Something is. Are they conscious? Are they aware of their existence?
Yeah, there's been some stories and shows and movies that have explored that, whether the person who is turned into a zombie still has a window on what's happening, and that they realize it. But, what I ask my classes when I teach a zombie class is, if you're in a tight hallway with a zombie, would you rather that be a zombie who you didn't know when they were alive, or would you rather it be your own grandma in zombie form, And most people pick the non-grandma option, because you can, with less guilt, you can kill the non-grandma zombie. If it's your grandma, even though it's not your grandma anymore, you're still gonna feel bad about taking an axe to her. You're gonna hesitate, and you're probably gonna get hurt, infected, or something.
Yeah, it's like back when The Walking Dead really was about The Walking Dead, and you had to make a decision about, this is my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Yeah, you really don't know what. Well, it's like in any kind of James Bond or any kind of movie, or Fast and Furious, when the bad guy's got the girl and he's pointing a gun to her head, and if you don't drop your gun, I'm going to kill her. But he knows if he drops his gun that he's going to get killed as well. but he can't help it. Even if the rest of the world is going to die because you know what I mean.
Oh, I know. That's like Tom Cruise is in that position every single Mission Impossible. You know.
Yeah. I don't know how it became. I guess you would call it a meme now, but it definitely is. And it's again the reason why it's compelling is because you don't know what you would do.
Yeah. No. You hope you'd be smart enough, like John McClane in Die Hard, to use Christmas tape to put a secret gun on your back, you know. but,
or you're a good enough shot that it just takes you a second to hit it right there.
Yeah. And I like those versions of that dynamic where somebody's holding somebody else, you know, drop your gun or I'll shoot this person. And the person who's supposed to drop their gun instead shoots the person that the bad guy's holding, you know, but just shoots them in a non-mortal way, such that they're hurt now. They're just dead weight for the person. And it's a fun way to remove someone from the equation. It's probably pretty terrible for the person who gets shot, I suspect.
Well, you got one of those in there, kind of like the one in Tombstone where he just, you know.
Yeah.
You got one. And plus, they're not the greatest shots.
Yeah.
There's so many, you know, this is horrible too. I had this friend who was changing the oil in his car and he was by himself and the jack broke. So something in your story. So he was there, no one else was there. And I always wondered, I hope to God it just happened like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You live off of that. That's what that's your livelihood.
Yeah, I mean, I do talk about the terrible stuff on the page, but hopefully I talk about some hopeful stuff too. Like, to me, I think, like, if the whole landscape is bloody and you see one little lonely daisy growing up out of that landscape, then that daisy means so much more, you know? And so what I want to do when I write is put one of those daisies in every story, in every book, like one little thing of goodness, you know?
Yeah, that's what they say about the lotus. The lotus is this beautiful, beautiful flower, but it grows out of crap. And you just say, it's kind of a Buddhist thing. And I had once when I was in an altered state of consciousness when I was in college, I saw that. It was like, okay, everything was desolate and barren for as far as the eye could see, but there was this one lotus that just grew out, and it was like that was the end of the trip. And I was like, oh yeah, which reminds me, show us that gesture that Indians make with the two gestures, like when you say it's over, and then you
yeah. You know, I remember when I was a kid, like really young elementary, from the library, not from like any of my family members, and not from the reservation, just from my public library, my school library in West Texas. I somehow got a book that said Indian Sign Language, and I remember looking at it and like doing those hand motions myself and thinking, this is how people, like, you know, when like two nations who didn't know each other's language would meet, they could get across what they wanted to know with sign language, of course. That's what the book said anyways, and that's always stuck with me. And I was surprised when it came out in this book, you know.
I did what you did. I made that when you wrote that. I made the gesture.
Nice.
And the other gesture is the one that, you know, on YouTube you can watch, like these segments that are called the most respectful and kindest moments in sports. And again, without giving anything away, at the very end, there's that. Yeah. And the cool thing is the way you implied that it was replicated all over the world, kind of. Yeah. And that was a great thing. Am I giving too much away? Am I talking too much?
No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody can crack the ending from that. But no, that's what I wanted. I'm so glad that landed. I'm so glad it had resonance. That's always the goal, you know?
Yeah, it is. And that's, you know, what it does. It brings everything back to, like we were talking about at the very beginning, about humanity. You know, at the very end, there is still this respect. Yeah. Again, it's ingrained in people in America that Indians are very much like that. No matter whether you're a jackass racist or whatever you are, there is this thing about, you know, this is it. You know, you've met a foe that's honorable and strong, and you don't do as well as you could have, but you still acknowledge their strength.
Yeah. It's like in. Do you remember Predator from what, 87, I guess? When the Predator is fighting the character Billy Soul, the Indian guy, he takes his head, because the Predator kills everybody except Arnold, or what's his name, Dutch. But he takes his head because he respects him as a foe, He and everybody else he just dispenses with, but he takes Billy Soul's head, and I always like that,
Yeah, it's like Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven when he's about to kill Gene Hackman, and Gene Hackman says, "I'll see you in hell," and he says, "Yeah, I've killed just about everything that's walked and crawled." There's something about all this, and part of it is kind of a guide. Oh yeah, so when you go to when you do readings and stuff like that, what do you find the difference between men and women who read your books and how they relate to them?
That's a good question. I never thought about that. Let me see. I really don't even think I have a good answer. I've never distinguished. I don't really have responses indexed in my head like that. I'm trying to think if I can come up with anything. I can't. I don't know. I don't know about any difference. There may be some difference that I don't know about, and it could be that it's best that I don't know about it, because then I'll change my writing. I don't know.
That's why I wondered about it, because I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. Well, actually, the thing about it is that you don't make men the heroes and the women just standing around like they do in the movies we were just talking about, where they're held by the bad guy. You don't do that at all.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive to. I don't want to turn women into damsels and men into saviors or anything like that, of course. And I'm also very aware of you can overcorrect in a weird way where all of your women are like these amazing, tough warriors who beat everybody. And that's just as dangerous as some people, when they write Indians, they only write good Indians, which is to say we resist the essentialism of Indians are all like this, that, and the other, which are bad representations. But if we're only represented positively, that's just as bad. It makes us be noble and stoic in 19th century and all that stuff. I think it's important to render people on the page just to portray the gamut of what a person can be, or what people can be, I guess. They can be terrible, they can be great. I think we need more Indian bad guys, because if there's only Indian good guys, that's not real. There's bad people in every culture.
That's why Democrats are really, I think, hurting themselves, because they're doing that. If they're going over the edge, whether it's, I don't know, whether it's a trans issue or whether it's whatever it is, even if it's student loans. If you try to run on a platform now about climate change and trans issues, it's not going to work. It's just,
It's like the way politics functions on the kind of the social media scene is your message or your platform has to be reduced down to such a polarizing position, like that, or there's not a lot of room for nuance, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it's all this Karen stuff now, and then whatever the culture, cancel culture. It's okay, that lady in Central Park confronting the black dude Cooper. They're both named Cooper, and he's the coolest guy. He's a bird watcher and doesn't yell at her or anything. And then when all this stuff happens to her, he's she is at the end of the basketball game. He's she wants to apologize to me. It's fine. Now she's charged with all this stuff. Her life is completely ruined. Same as that couple that confronted that Filipino guy who was canceling Black Lives Matter. I mean, she lost her job. She lost her career, her distributor. And the poor husband who was kind of you could tell what his relationship with his wife was. I could say the word, but he lost his job too. And you're saying, it's just, you push. It's just the pendulum thing. And it's funny because your characters, they all kind of make fun of it too. this is the way Indians are supposed to be. And
Yeah.
like when they're doing the sweat and they play the drum tape and it plays over and over, and they're doing their chanting. It's not real chanting, but it's close enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like you do what you can, like we can't do it exactly as we did it 200 years ago, but it's best that we don't too, because if you lock ritual practices or ceremony in place, then that's like freeze drying them, and they're going to crumble away. I think ceremony and ritual has to change with the times. It has to, it can't just be what worked in 1750. It has to be what works in 2020.
Yeah, that's another problem too, because most religions don't evolve that way. It's interesting though, the way you kind of create a template, because you say when he's doing it, you got to go up, 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 and then down. The chanting, the way you describe it.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of template that you lay it on top of.
Yeah, there is. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's a really interesting concept that you put here, because I've never read a book like it. And you do two things, and I haven't had a chance to read your other works, but I will now. But are there any others in which you introduce Native American culture in addition to the?
Yeah, there is. I have a novel called Leadfeather from '07, I guess. That's LED Feather, which is set, up on the Blackfeet Reservation. And I also have Mapping the Interior, which is in the same world as the Only Good Indians. Like, there's someone mentioned dead floating in a lake in this novel, and that's a person from Mapping the Interior.
It's interesting the way you describe how everyone dies, even the guy in the lake. Got a little confusing there for a second. Then it was okay. Then I got it. I was watching one of your interviews. Tell that little anecdote about your buddy who said that you really nailed it. Teen Angst. The Teen Angst.
Yeah, that's Will Christopher Bear. He said that, he's like a really he's a serious guy. He's a funny guy, but a serious guy. And he said one time, I think we were on the phone, maybe, I don't remember, that I did a really good, I have a real knack for teen angst. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And I was all puffed up and proud of that. And then later that night, I'm walking home and I realized, wait, was he insulting me? Was he saying I never grew up? What's going on?
Yeah. The ones people give me are kind of closer, but still kind of like someone tell me, you're the absolutest smartest idiot I've ever met in my life. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when it's really weird. I was with my son the other day in my office, and my screensaver is my pictures on my computer, and I have like 41,360. So it's scrolling through all of them, and he's talking about his friend Randy, who was a compulsive gambler and killed himself a couple of years ago. And as soon as he mentions the name Randy's picture comes up on the computer pictures. And I've never taken a picture of Randy, ever.
Wow.
So you think of all the variables. My son had to be in my office, which he doesn't like seeing me at all anyway. He had to be there. He had to be looking at the computer. He had to be talking about the guy, and he had to be seeing the picture. We've been talking about it since then, because it's like that thing where, your chances of winning the lottery are 34 million to 1, but someone still wins it,
Yeah. Wow,
that's
crazy.
Yeah, it really, that was a really crazy one. But it's like the wheel, the great wheel of life, the Mandela. In your life, things are going to come around.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a different kind of thing from, I'll be telling my wife about a song we both know from 1988, and then I go in the other room and look on my Twitter feed, and that song is like got priority on my feed, and that's because my phone was listening to me, which is terrible.
Well, that's like 30% of Americans now believe that Bill Gates' vaccine is going to inject you with a microchip. I mean, people really believe it. And then I go, well, it's a concept for a novel. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you think of a song, you turn to radio. Yeah, I think of Stairway to Heaven, turn on the radio, and Stairway to Heaven's playing. I mean, yeah. It's gonna happen 10 or 20 times in your life.
Yeah.
So now that you've been stuck inside and all that, I'm asking a bunch of authors this, and I get, it's another one of the kind of Terry Gross questions. But since you've been stuck inside, have you found it like helpful, creativity and all that stuff?
As far as writing, it's been the same for me. Like I just write every chance I get. So maybe I have more chances now with all these stay-at-home orders, simply because I'm not on the road. I generally feel like I'm wheels up like 2 weeks of the month. It's probably not that much, but I'm always like every third weekend at least, I'm doing stuff, going to a conference, doing a book event, doing a bookstore, whatever. And since I'm not having to go back and forth to the airport, which is an hour and a half away, and since I'm not having traveling days on either side of all these events that I'm doing online now, I probably do have more time to write. Yeah.
3 of my nephews, like one after the other, went to the University of Colorado. So I texted them today and sent your picture and all that, and they knew who you were. They hadn't taken your classes, but they all knew who you were. They go, yeah, he looks. One of them goes, yeah, he really looks like a hippie.
Yeah. There's a lot of. Boulder's the right place for that.
I used to go onto the hill at Boulder in 1970. I saw Neil Young and Crazy Horse at the stadium there. Yeah. That was a great place. It was a lot different then, and a lot like I was talking about earlier. Spent a lot of time doing things that probably have really screwed me up big time. I had a good time though.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, I think we've covered it, but so I got this independent bookstore, Wellington Square Books, and we just reopened. So tomorrow, I think, will be the first day we put this book on the front table. I think it's going to do really well, and I'm so glad that I got to read it because it introduces me to you, and I can start reading your other stuff, which will be great. So thanks a lot for doing this.
It's been great talking, man. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm glad.
Yeah, great. Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
Take it easy, man.
You too.